This is the absurd situation we find ourselves in. Hamas released 3 Israeli hostages from their terror dungeons yesterday. In exchange, Israel released 90 Palestinian terrorists. For each Israeli hostage that's been suffering in Gaza, we released 30 killers, terrorists, back onto the streets. What did the media show? They showed Palestinian women leaving Israel's prisons alongside images of Israeli women leaving Hamas captivity, as if these were nice women leaving Israeli prisons and these were nice women leaving Hamas captivity. However, just as an example, one of the Palestinian women is 62-year-old Khalida Jarrar. She's a gray-haired woman. She could be your grandmother. But why was she behind bars? Jarrar ran a cell in a terror organization called the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, the PFLP. In 2017, a 17-year-old Israeli girl named Rina Schneer was on a hike. A PFLP terrorist was watching Rina from a distance. He held a remote detonator in his hand. When Rina got close to the bomb, the terrorist pressed the button. The bomb exploded and Rina was murdered. Jarrar did not push the button herself, but she ran the cell that carried out the operation. This is who Hamas is fighting to free. This is who Hamas is fighting to free from Israeli prisons. We are overjoyed to see Emily, Doron, and Romy come home. They did not blow up any 17-year-old girls. Israel wants innocent civilians back home. Hamas wants the people who murdered innocent civilians to be back on the streets. Don't let anyone forget this. This is the one thing the whole world needs to understand. The rehabilitation of Gaza cannot mean the rehabilitation of Hamas. Hamas cannot be allowed again to rule Gaza. Hamas was weakened. Hamas is right now getting a breather. Hamas's plan right now is to take over Gaza. And when the billions pour in for reconstruction, Hamas wants to be there to get their cut. Hamas wants to rebuild their economy. Hamas wants to strengthen their ties with backers Turkey and Qatar, just like they did with Iran. Hamas will try to do all this while the world is not paying attention. That's why they want Israel out of the Gaza Strip. That's why they want Israel out of the Philadelphia corridor, which is the border of Egypt. Hamas is planning to take over Gaza today in order to destroy Israel tomorrow. Just because there's a hostage deal does not mean Hamas's war is over. Let's not be fooled. Hamas is planning to rebrand, rebuild, but their goal is the same. Hamas's goal is war until Israel is destroyed. Now, please let's take some questions from our audience watching live on social media.
Thank you, Doron. Our first question comes from Instagram. An IDF reservist was killed by a roadside bomb today in the West Bank. There may be a ceasefire in Gaza, but does this mean that the situation in the West Bank could head up further?
There is no question that the situation in Judea and Samaria, which is also called the West Bank, is becoming more dangerous as a result of this deal. The terrorists, many of them who are being released from Israeli prisons, which is the awful, gut-wrenching price of releasing the Israeli hostages that are suffering in Gaza, many of them are heading into Judea and Samaria. Just to give you some idea, right now I'm standing in Tel Aviv. Judea and Samaria is 13 miles from where I'm standing. The entire country of Israel is a very small place. We're not releasing the terrorists to downtown Tel Aviv, but we are releasing them to areas where there are Jews living and Palestinians living that are just a few miles from downtown Tel Aviv, downtown Jerusalem, and Haifa. This is a very big problem, and in response, the Israeli military has been buffering up the military presence in Judea and Samaria to ensure, God willing, that those terrorists that are being released and the wave of Hamas terrorism that's celebrating to have more members fighting in Judea and Samaria will not be successful in targeting the Israelis.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Debbie on Instagram. Why doesn't Israel have the death penalty for these terrorists?
This is really a question for the legal establishment. Israel's only used the death penalty once, and it was for Adolf Eichmann following World War II and his role as one of the masterminds of the Holocaust. There are many who think that Israel should have the death penalty. but this is really a legal issue. There are legal experts that are dealing with this. And I personally understand where you're coming from. And I think many Israelis personally understand where you're coming from. Write to your local Knesset member and let's see what we can do.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Nick on Instagram. Why are the proportions like this? Shouldn't 100 hostages be exchanged for one terrorist?
First of all, there should be no terrorists that are exchanged for Israeli hostages. Israeli hostages were abducted from their beds while sleeping in the Israeli communities. As an example, one of the women that was released yesterday, Emily, she texted her family saying, "They've got me." This is the type of people that are being released. Romy wrote to her parents, the last text said, "I'm bleeding, I've been shot, everyone in the car is bleeding." These are the Israeli hostages. They were ripped from their beds and taken to Gaza. They're not worth any Hamas terrorists. Hamas terrorists should be in their jail. There is no proportion whatsoever. The only thing that is correct is that 96 Israeli hostages should be coming home. The issue is that Israel has been fighting Hamas in Gaza. We've had an incredible victory against Hamas in Gaza, against Hezbollah in the north, against the Houthis, and against militias in Iraq and Iran, not to mention Iran itself and the downfall of Syria. However, when you have Israelis who are trapped underneath the ground, including Jews and Muslims and Christians, our hearts go out to them, and we're doing what we can to bring them home. And this, and I appreciate your question, is the awful price we're paying, a price that, God forbid, it may cost more blood in the future in order to catch these criminals and bring them back to justice again.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Karen. Did all of the released prisoners go to Gaza or did they go elsewhere?
No, Karen, the prisoners went to multiple locations, and some of them, as I just mentioned, actually went to Judea and Samaria, others to Gaza. And we'll see as this is a gradual plan. As it's unfolding, there are different negotiations in place where the rest of them will go. But unfortunately, wherever they go, they're going free. This is bad for anyone who cares about freedom. This is bad for anyone that lives in any country that respects life. If these people and their cohorts are strengthened because they're leaving Israeli prisons, it could encourage other terrorists around the world to try to carry out terror acts. And therefore, we all need to be vigilant and understand there's only one place for these terrorists. It's locked away where they can't hurt anybody.
Thank you. This is our final question. Donald Trump becomes the president of the United States in a few hours. What is Israel looking for from the new administration?
The most important thing that Israel's looking for is to be a strong, independent, and vital state where we can protect our own democratic interests, the Jews, Christians, and Muslims that live in our border. We are a peace-seeking nation, but we are a strong nation. We're not going to be bullied. We're certainly not going to allow another October 7th to happen. And we welcome the incoming administration who sees eye to eye with these values. America is the greatest friend of Israel, and therefore, hopefully together, we can build a stronger Israel, which means a stronger Middle East. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for tuning in. We'll be back tomorrow at 3 p.m. Israel time, 8 a.m. East Coast time. Thank you for watching.